I'm Chloe. I hope that you've enjoyed learning about the Qinghai Tibet Railway. Today we're going to be breaking down the important aspects of the text and looking at how we can create a summary of it in English to make it easier to understand and explain. Then I'm going to have a conversation with my good friend Chris about the text. Chris, would you mind just giving us a little introduction for those who haven't met you yet?
Sure, I'm Chris, I'm from the UK. I've been in China over 10 years, working in education, in the education field, and helping students who want to go and study abroad.
Fantastic. So, to begin with, we need to think about the background of the story. The text begins by talking about the 1,000 li of tundra, extreme cold, shortage of atmospheric oxygen, and a fragile ecology. If we want to sum this up succinctly, we would just say that there were many problems or difficulties. Now look at the word li. Many native English speakers may not know that li is a traditional Chinese unit of measurement. So we could simplify this by just saying a great distance, or words to that effect. As our main objective is to give a summary, we can start to think which words are necessary and which words we can leave out. Quite often, we can leave out adjectives as long as they don't change the meaning. So instead of saying extreme cold, shortage of atmospheric oxygen, and a fragile ecology, we could say cold, shortage of oxygen, and ecology. Then the text mentions the name Xiao Yaoxia. So we need to briefly say who she was. Very simply, we could say she was part of a huge team that worked on the project. Next, we have to think about why she has been included in the text, and the reason is that she faced many of the challenges that her co-workers faced, as well as some of her own, such as health problems. So in our summary, we should include a list of those challenges. Finally, in our summary, we need to talk about the outcome. Simply put, they succeeded in creating the highest railway tunnel in the world and came up with many new solutions to solve the problems of building a railway at this altitude. Now let's try and summarise that briefly. There were great difficulties in building the Qinghai Tibet Railway. These included the distance, the cold, lack of oxygen and ecology. For this reason, the project was delayed for more than 30 years. However, a huge team of people persevered, and this team included Xiao Yaoxia. When the project began, she had to deal with even more problems than she imagined, including floods, wolves, health problems, and lack of sleep. Despite all of these hardships, she and her co-workers were able to create the highest railway tunnel in the world and came up with ingenious solutions to problems such as lack of oxygen. So, Chris, what was your general impression of the story?
It really is a great example of people overcoming great challenges to create something spectacular. But why is the Qinghai Tibet Railway so important?
Well, the final destination of the railway line is Lhasa. For a long time, Lhasa was quite inaccessible due to its geographical situation. With the opening of the railway line, Lhasa became much more connected to the rest of China, and this brought great opportunities with it.
Can you tell me more about the geographical situation?
Of course. Lhasa lies on the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, which is the highest place in the world. It reaches to an altitude of over 4,500 meters above sea level. This is why the article mentions the problem of atmospheric oxygen. At this altitude, oxygen levels are severely reduced, and this made the job even more difficult.
The text uses the term fragile ecology. What does the author mean by this?
The Qinghai Tibetan Plateau features large areas of breathtaking natural wilderness. In the planning process of the railway, special care was taken to make sure this ecosystem was not disrupted. Successful measures were introduced to ensure that the construction and operation of the train line would not disrupt the balance of nature in this very special environment.
I know the text mentions wolves. What other kinds of wildlife live there?
There is a huge biodiversity present on the plateau. This includes many unique species that have specifically adapted to the conditions, such as the Tibetan antelope, wild yak, and kiang.
I've never heard of a kiang before. What is that?
It's a type of wild donkey native to the region. Many of these species are very rare and protected by law, so it was very important to ensure their safety during the construction process.
Why do you think the author chose to focus on Xiao Yaoxia out of all the people that worked on the project?
I think it's largely because she was the only woman who was working on a team. She faced extra unforeseen difficulties, such as the initial lack of female toilet facilities. Unfortunately, this led to her contracting some health problems, but she still continued regardless. She was an incredible person who was very dedicated. I like the way the author described that she left an impression like a giant.
I see. I guess we can use this to demonstrate the way attitudes towards gender were changing, and we can see the great contributions women have made and are making to society.
I think so. Throughout the 20th and 21st century, we have seen many women who have made fantastic achievements.
I agree.
Thinking back to the project itself, it was a groundbreaking moment in construction history. Can you think of any projects like this in Western countries?
Let me think. Well, the London Underground subway system was undoubtedly a groundbreaking achievement. Opening in 1863, it is the oldest underground train system in the world, and nowadays we tend to take subways for granted. But before its construction, it must have been unimaginable to think that an underground train could take you anywhere in a city in a matter of minutes. Of course, at that time, it would have been a lot less pleasant than it is today. When it opened, the trains that ran along it were still steam trains, so the air quality was terrible.
Oh, I'm glad our modern subway trains use electricity. If it's been open for over 150 years, it must have seen a lot of history in that time.
Sure, yes, it famously gained a secondary use during the Second World War, when it doubled as an air raid shelter for many of London's citizens. And when there was a bombing raid, people would take shelter in the underground stations until they were given the all clear.
Oh. Are there any examples of construction projects that had to deal with difficult terrain?
An interesting example from America is the Georgetown Loop in Colorado in the United States. It was constructed in 1884 and also had to deal with the obstacles of mountainous topography. However, they dealt with this in a very different way. Instead of going over or tunneling through the mountains, they went around them, and the tracks wind their way through the landscape like a giant snake.
I'd love to see that.
You can actually still see the way it was in 1884 when it was constructed. To this day, they still operate a train service using an actual steam train.
Wow.
It's a great glimpse into the past.
That's amazing. Earlier, we talked about how Xiao Yaoxia was the only woman on the team. Are there any Western stories about female pioneers like this?
Yeah, both in science and the arts. The first one that I think of would be Marie Curie. Her work on radioactivity has been so important in developing our understanding of the world and advancing scientific development. Yet she achieved this at a time when there were very few women working in science.
Yeah.
In addition, the English authors, the Bronte sisters, were also examples of women who showed that they could be successful in a male-dominated field. At that time, it was very difficult for women to become published writers or be respected by the literary community. And at first, they even used male pen names to disguise their gender. But all three of them became world-renowned authors during their lifetimes, and their novels, such as Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, can still be found in bookshops around the globe.
Amazing. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Chris. I think we've both learnt a lot about some of the great achievements of the world, as well as the people that helped to make them happen. So it's a goodbye from myself.
And a goodbye from me.
Bye-bye.